On today's Growing Idaho, whether you're renting or buying, housing is getting somehow even less affordable in the area. You may remember last week when we told you about a new housing report that says Idaho is facing a shortage of more than 24,000 affordable rental properties for low-income families. The Idaho Asset Building Network says in both urban and rural Idaho, nearly 50% of those who rent are cost burdened. That means they spend more than 30% of their income on rent. So how many hours would a person making, say, minimum wage in Idaho have to work to afford a median-priced apartment without being cost burdened? Well, Redfin says 165 hours a week. Again, to avoid being cost burdened, you want to keep your housing costs at or below 30% of your income. The Idaho minimum wage is tied to the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25. The median asking price for an apartment in Idaho, according to Redfin, $1,550 a month. That means you'd have to work 165 hours in a week to afford a median-priced apartment. By the way, there are only 168 hours total in a week. So you'd have 3 hours a week to sleep in that apartment as long as you don't have to commute. That is, of course, insane and in no way feasible. So what if you're like, well, forget renting, I'm just going to buy a place? Well, if you're saying that, you must not be watching Growing Idaho often, because the housing market also a bit insane. NBC releases a regular home buyer index rating communities on a number of factors to get an average rating between 1 and 100 on how hard it is to buy a home. Here's the trend from 2018 to earlier this year in Ada County. That green line in the middle is the overall rating, which now sits at 64.4. That's up almost 13 points from 2018. That's driven by home cost. That's the top yellow line, which you can see just continuing to increase there. That's while competition and scarcity, the blue and orange lines, those are just kind of all over the place. The takeaway is buying a home still really hard right now, but not harder than renting a place if you're making minimum wage. And if you're keeping an eye on mortgage rates, speaking of buying, the Federal Reserve did hold their key rate steady last week, choosing not to cut it. They do see a couple rate cuts coming later this year. They also forecasted the economy to be weaker and inflation to go up, including housing, crediting President Trump's tariffs.